When the storms of life hit, what is the anchor that keeps you from drifting away? We explore the stories of faith, love, and loyalty that hold us together when everything else falls apart. Subscribe today and find your own anchor in our stories.
On my 67th birthday, in front of 31 guests my son had personally invited, my son stood up from the head of the table I bought, in the house I own, and told every single person in that room that I was losing my mind, that I could no longer be trusted with my own finances, and that he had already begun the paperwork to have himself appointed my legal guardian. I'm Eugenia May Thornton. I'm 67 years old. I did not gasp. I did not cry. I set down my fork, folded my hands in my lap, and I looked at my son across the birthday cake he'd ordered for me. White roses on chocolate frosting, my favorite since I was 9 years old. And I thought to myself, you have just made the most expensive mistake of your life. I spent 35 years as a principal at Jefferson Elementary School in Memphis, Tennessee. I put 214 children through reading intervention programs. I supervised 67 teachers. I balanced a school budget through 3 recessions, 2 floods, and 1 tornado that took the roof clean off the gymnasium in 2008. I am not a woman who loses her mind. I am a woman who makes up her mind quietly, carefully, and completely. My son Braxton thought he was protecting himself. What he didn't know was that while he was staging that little performance at my dining room table, I was already calculating exactly how long it would take to sell the house out from under him, freeze the account access he had as assumed belonged to him by inheritance, and dismantle every advantage I had spent 35 years building in his name. This is the story of what happens when a woman finally stops being afraid of her own love. If you have ever been humiliated by someone you would have burned the world down for, someone you chose above yourself decade after decade, stay with me until the end. Because what I did next wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. And there is a difference. Let me take you back to that dining room. It was a Saturday evening in late April. The dogwoods along Poplar Avenue were in full bloom. Willis used to say Memphis in dogwood season was the most beautiful place on earth, and every April since he passed 8 years ago, I still go stand at the front window when those flowers open just to feel close to him for a minute. Willis was a structural engineer, a quiet man, careful with money, with words, with everything he built. He believed in putting things in writing. He believed in planning for the worst while hoping for the best. He left me 3 things when he died: a life insurance policy, a clean conscience, and the house. The house on Sycamore Ridge Drive had been Willis's idea. He'd seen the neighborhood developing in 2009, when prices were low, and nobody wanted to bet on that part of East Memphis. He bought the lot, designed the foundation himself, oversaw every beam and joint. I chose the kitchen tile. I planted the magnolia tree in the front yard from a 6-inch sapling the year Braxton started middle school. We moved in when Braxton was 12, and that boy grew up in those rooms. Did his homework at that kitchen island, had his first heartbreak on the back porch, wore his Northwestern acceptance letter in his shirt pocket for 3 days straight because he said he wanted to feel it close to him. When Willis passed, I kept the house because it was the last thing he and I had built together. It was appraised 14 months ago at $910,000. The deed was in my name. I want you to understand that before I tell you the rest. Braxton was 34. A financial advisor at a boutique wealth management firm downtown he'd started with a partner named Sutton 2 years earlier. Good reputation on paper. Nice offices on Madison Avenue. A website with professional photographs, suits that fit well. Braxton had inherited his father's build and my father's charm, the kind that makes strangers feel like they've known you for years, which is a useful quality in a financial advisor and a dangerous one in a son. His wife, Christine, was 28, pretty in a careful way, with a smile that worked like a door, open just enough to let you think you were inside, never quite far enough to see the room. She was 8 months pregnant the night of my birthday dinner. My first grandchild was on the way. I had made a reservation at a restaurant downtown I'd been saving for the occasion. Braxton called the week before and said he'd rather host at my house, that Christine was too far along to be comfortable in a booth. I said of course. I offered to cook. He said he'd handle everything. He handled everything, all right. There were 31 people in my dining room that evening. Friends from Calvary Baptist, 2 colleagues from my years at Jefferson Elementary, Willis's cousin and her husband, friends of Braxton and Christine's I'd met maybe twice, and Braxton's business partner Sutton sitting near the window, nursing a glass of wine he barely touched. The dinner was catered. Good food. Braxton gave a toast first. "Happy birthday, Mom. You mean the world to us. Thank you for everything you've sacrificed." People raised their glasses. Someone said amen. Christine smiled her door smile. Then Braxton sat down. And then he stood back up. He said there was something else he needed to share with the people who loved me most. He said he'd been worried for a while. He'd noticed things. I'd forgotten a dentist appointment in February, left a stove burner on once in March, gotten confused about the date for last month's dinner, and shown up a day early. He said he'd consulted a specialist on my behalf, a Dr. Webb at Methodist Hospital, and that based on a recent evaluation, there were early signs of cognitive decline that warranted serious attention. He said, "The best thing for Mom right now is to have someone managing her affairs before she makes decisions she can't take back. I've already spoken to an attorney about guardianship proceedings. It's not what any of us want, but it's what she needs." He put his hand over his heart when he said it. The room went quiet. I looked around that table. My church friends, my colleagues, Willis's cousin, 31 people who had known me for years, who had watched me run a school and raise a child and bury a husband and keep going, all of them looking at their plates, or at each other, or at anything except me. Christine was looking at me. The door smile was gone. What was in its place was something colder, something that looked, if I am being honest, like relief. I picked up my fork, I cut a piece of lamb, I chewed, I swallowed. I said, "Thank you all so much for being here tonight." And I did not say another word about what Braxton had done. I ate my birthday dinner. I spoke to my guests. I laughed at the right moments. When Braxton brought out the cake, I blew out the candles and I made a wish, and I will tell you right now what that wish was. I wished my son would one day understand that the thing he did that night was not love. It was not even strategy. It was desperation wearing the costume of concern. After everyone left, Braxton asked if he and Christine should stay over. He said it with worry in his voice. The voice he'd used at 12 when he'd done something wrong and wanted to get ahead of the consequences before I could. I said I was fine. I said to take Christine home and get some rest. I stood at the front window until his taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I went to my desk. The cherrywood desk Willis had refinished the summer before he got sick, and I opened my leather planner, the same planner I have used since 1991. Every dentist appointment written in black ink, every meeting, every oil change. I turned to February. I found the dentist appointment Braxton claimed I'd forgotten. It was there, with a small check mark in the corner, the way I mark things when they are completed. Then I picked up the phone. It was 10:43 at night. Vernon Childs answered on the second ring. Vernon had been Willis's closest friend from his early career. They had stayed close for 30 years, through career changes and children and loss. Vernon was 69 now, semi-retired, kept a small practice downtown handling estate work mostly. He was the man Willis had trusted with every document that mattered. He was the man who had driven me home from the hospital the last night, and who had sat in the front pew at the funeral without needing to be asked. He said, "Eugenia, it's almost 11. What happened?" I told him everything. The dinner, the guests, the hand over the heart. There was a silence. Then Vernon said very carefully, "Are you certain that's what he said, in front of people?" "In front of 31 people," I said. He used the word guardianship. He named a specialist. "Eugenia," Vernon's voice was low. "Do you want to speak to him first? Give him a chance to explain." "No," I said. The word came out like something I had decided a long time ago and only just now said out loud. "Vernon, what can I do with the house right now? Tonight? What are my options?" I heard him exhale long and slow. "Braxton is not your guardian," he said. "He has no legal authority over you. If he's filed preliminary paperwork, it hasn't been heard by a judge. The house is yours entirely." "Then I want to sell it," I said. "I want it sold before he comes for Sunday brunch." "Eugenia." "He keeps some things in my garage. He has a key I gave him 3 years ago when Christine had emergency surgery and I was helping out. That is the full extent of his connection to that property, Vernon. His name is on nothing." "A cash sale can happen fast," Vernon said slowly, "but even fast is 48 hours minimum. There's a developer named Prentice Baines who has written me 3 letters in the past year asking about the Sycamore Ridge property. I never opened a single one. Call him. Tell him I have a cash sale to discuss, tonight if he's willing. He'll come in under market. I know. You could lose $150,000 on the price alone. Vernon. I looked at the magnolia tree through the window, dark now against the streetlight. Call Prentice Baines. And first thing tomorrow morning, I need you to reach Cecile Odom. She does private investigative work. I need her to find out everything about this Dr. Webb at Methodist Hospital and everything about what legal filings, if any, Braxton has actually made. You think he fabricated the evaluation? I think my son is in financial trouble, I said, and I think a house worth $900,000 looks like a solution to a man who is frightened. I want to know how frightened. I hung up the phone. I did not sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with chamomile tea, and I looked at the room Willis and I had eaten breakfast in for 16 years. The crown molding he had installed himself one long weekend in October. The backsplash I had chosen at a tile showroom on a Tuesday afternoon in 2003. The magnolia tree just barely visible through the glass, taller now than the porch roof. I was not sad, I was past sad. Sadness requires uncertainty, and I had none left. By 7:50 the next morning, Vernon called. Prentice Baines had offered $762,000, cash, possession within 48 hours. I said yes. At 9:30, Vernon called again. His voice was different, controlled in the way voices get when the person on the other end is working to stay steady. Eugenia, Cecile found something, you need to come to my office. I drove downtown and sat in the same chair I had sat in when we reviewed Willis's estate papers 8 years ago. On Vernon's desk was a folder Cecile had assembled in fewer than 14 hours, which told me two things. She was thorough, and what she had found had alarmed her enough to work through the night. The first document was a cognitive evaluation form attributed to a Dr. Webb at Methodist. The doctor existed. Cecile had confirmed that. But the evaluation was dated March 3rd of this year, the same week I had been in Nashville for a 3-day literacy conference. I had receipts. I had a hotel confirmation. I had a lanyard from the opening session still hanging on my coat hook by the door. The signature at the bottom of the evaluation looked like mine. Almost. The E in Eugenia had a slightly different lean. Cecile had compared it to 6 authentic signatures from my school board records. The forged version was close, the kind of close that only comes from copying off a document rather than from years of writing your own name. My son had forged a psychiatric evaluation. I sat with that for a moment, just a moment. Then Vernon turned to the second section of the folder. Braxton's firm had been under review by the State Securities Commission for 6 months. Irregular withdrawals from client accounts. Returns misrepresented in written disclosures, and threaded through the firm's promotional materials from the past year was a testimonial, attributed to a distinguished retired Memphis educator and community leader, Eugenia M. Thornton, praising the firm's commitment to its clients. I had never said those words. I had never spoken to anyone at that firm about their services. I had never agreed to have my name, my professional title, or my 35 years of public service used to sell anything to anyone. The clients they had solicited using my name, the commission's file noted, were primarily elderly, retired teachers, city employees, people who would recognize the name of a former principal and trust it. My son had used me to steal from people like me. I closed the folder. How many clients? I asked. 11 identified so far. The commission believes there are more. I'll give them a full statement, I said. The forged signature, the promotional materials, everything. Whatever the commission needs. Vernon nodded. And the house sale closes when? Tomorrow, Tuesday noon. Baines has possession. I want the locks changed Monday evening, I said, before Braxton comes to collect whatever he keeps in the garage. Monday evening, I drove to Sycamore Ridge Drive and parked 2 houses down, engine off. I watched Braxton's car pull up at 6:12. He came alone. He moved toward the front door the way a person moves when they believe they belong somewhere. Key's already out, comfortable, unhurried. He put the key in the lock. It did not turn. He tried again, looked at the key, turned it over in his hand, tried again, stepped back and looked at the door, then at the house. Then he called me. I watched the name light up my screen and I let it ring. He called again. I let it ring. A man in a hard hat came around the side of the house then, one of Baines's people, there for a preliminary walkthrough, and he asked my son, politely, if he could help him. My son said he lived there. The man in the hard hat said the property had been purchased by Baines Development as of 11 that morning, and that he would need to step away from the entrance. I watched my son's face from 2 houses away. The color left it in stages. He called someone. He walked in a small, tight circle on the front walk. He ran one hand back and forth across the top of his head, the way he'd done since he was a boy trying to think his way out of something. I put the car in drive. I drove away slowly. He called me 5 more times that evening. On the 6th call, I answered. Mom. His voice came out broken in the middle of the word. Mom, what did you do? I sold the house, Braxton. You can't, that's Dad's house, Mom, you can't just. The deed was in my name, I said, my house, my choice. You're not well, Mom. His voice steadied into something almost convincing. That's what I was trying to help people understand. You need someone looking out for you, making sure you don't. The evaluation you showed people, I said, is dated March 3rd. I was in Nashville on March 3rd. The hotel receipt, the conference program, time-stamped photographs from the opening keynote. All of it is now with the Securities Commission along with my signed statement about the testimonials your firm published in my name, without my knowledge or consent. Silence. The kind that fills a room even through a phone. I'm not angry with you, I said. I'm finished being angry. I'm simply done being useful to your plans. I hung up. The Securities Commission moved quickly once my statement was on record. Braxton and Sutton were charged the following month. Fraud, forgery, elder financial exploitation. Braxton's attorney contacted me twice asking if I would consider a statement of leniency at sentencing. Both times I declined. I testified at the preliminary hearing. I wore the blue dress I had worn to Willis's retirement dinner, the last formal occasion we had before he got sick. I sat in the witness chair and told the truth precisely and without performance. Braxton's attorney suggested at one point that I may have been confused about the Nashville conference dates. I handed the court my leather planner. The judge reviewed it without speaking for a long moment. Then he looked at the attorney over his reading glasses and said, Counsel, this woman has documented every appointment she's kept since 1991. I'd encourage a different line of questioning. The plea deal Braxton eventually accepted was 18 months. Plus full restitution to 11 clients, plus 3 years of supervised probation. He is out now. He works in logistics at a company in East Memphis. Christine left before the charges were filed. I don't hold that against her, and I've told her so. The baby, a girl, was born healthy and beautiful, and has her grandfather's eyes. Christine decided early that her daughter should know her grandmother, regardless of what passed between the adults. I see my granddaughter on the first Saturday of every month at a park near Christine's apartment. We feed the ducks. She calls me Grandma G, and she has started losing her baby teeth, and she asks me questions about everything she sees, and I answer every single one. Braxton writes to me. Not every week, but steadily. He doesn't ask for things. He tells me about work, about the parenting classes he's taking, about the visits with his daughter that he says are the best hours of his week. He volunteers at a literacy program on Tuesday nights. He told me about it almost apologetically, like he was afraid I'd think he was performing. I wrote back and told him the only audience that matters is the one in the room with you. In one letter that I have read more than once, he wrote, The moment I really understood what I had done wasn't when the charges came. It wasn't when Christine left. It was standing on that front walk with the key that didn't work anymore. Dad built that house, and you sold it without blinking. And I finally understood that you never needed me to protect you. You never did. I was protecting my own fear and calling it love. I don't know yet whether my son has changed in the way that takes, the slow interior way that doesn't show up in letters but in the small decisions a person makes when no one is watching. That is his work now. It was never mine to do for him. What I know is that I am 67 years old, and I wake up in a bungalow in Midtown that I bought for $285,000 with a back garden where I grow tomatoes and rosemary. The money from the Sycamore Ridge sale funded as a literacy foundation in Willis's name. The Willis Thornton Foundation for Reading awarded its first scholarship last fall to a girl from Jefferson Elementary who wants to be a teacher. I cried when I handed her the check, which is the first time I cried through any of this, and it felt exactly right. I walked to the coffee shop on the corner at 7 in the morning. The girl behind the counter knows my order. In the evenings, I sit with the tomatoes and I read, or I call Vernon and we argue about the Grizzlies, or I write a letter to Braxton that I sometimes send and sometimes keep. I left the magnolia tree at the house on Sycamore Ridge. I hope Prentice Baines's people left it standing. I like to think it's still there, taller now, still blooming every April whether anyone notices or not. Trees don't need deeds to know where they belong. They just need roots. I had both, and when my son tried to take one, I discovered the other was deeper than either of us knew. That was enough. It still is.